what safety means and what learning means and what endangering versus opening up spaces for learning means on this campus. Abdul Qadir Sina was then taken and placed in front of a hearing where his evidence was contrasted to that of the security person. And as far as I understand, no other evidence was requested from anybody who participated in that well-attended event, where lots of people could have testified to the fact that no, there was no safety threat. It was as frankly, peaceful and civilized as pretty much many or most, I would say all even, of the events that have happened on this campus with regard to the war in Israel and many other more or less controversial events. So as a result of one person's testimony, who was not, let's say, an objective observer, a vested interest, on that, Abdul Qadir Sina has been disallowed from teaching and being in the presence of students, something that he loves doing, he's really great at doing, I've seen him do it. This is egregious. This is abuse of power, and folks, it's racism. A friend of Rita Meyer said that on Friday, and I'll repeat it. I have probably violated the policy that supposedly was violated, like a lot of times. I bet you have as well, Ivan. Sorry, I'm looking at you, and you have tenure, so I'm just going to go for that.
I'm sure I have.
And here we are, whitey white, standing here with our privilege. So there's that. And I think that's a very serious issue. It's something that we cannot disregard when we're thinking about academic freedom. This is about the privilege that we have and where we stand to speak truth to power about these problems. All right, who wants to take it on?
I've got one thing to add. For students, and I guess I would say for faculty as well, let me explain something very important, rather technical, about the disciplining and the sanctions that were placed on Professor Sino. So normally in a situation like that, the faculty, through what's called the Faculty Misconduct Review Board, which is part of the Bloomington Faculty Council, this is probably all very mysterious to the students, but in theory, when there is alleged serious faculty misconduct that might rise to serious sanctions, such as being removed from the classroom, that case is supposed to be brought to the Faculty Misconduct Review Committee, which objectively and fairly will do an investigation, will inquire into what happened, and will bring a neutral perspective from the faculty governing body to bear on that case. That doesn't mean that the Faculty Misconduct Review Committee will simply dismiss the charges and say, oh yeah, faculty, you can behave however you want. Of course, the FMRC is willing to tell our colleagues when they have indeed misbehaved. The problem in this instance is that the case was never brought to the proper faculty committee. That the Vice Provost of Faculty Affairs and the Provost believed and still believe that it was their right to unilaterally investigate this instance and to unilaterally conclude which sanctions were appropriate for Dr. Sino's alleged behavior. So I'm a member of the Faculty Misconduct Review Committee, which means I cannot and do not even want to speak out about the specifics of the case, because I was never privy to the investigation, as I believe I and the 4 other people in that committee should have been. So it's very important to understand that certainly people like Dr. Bukur and other people who are not on the review committee can and should speak out about how they feel about the particulars of the case. I am extremely upset in my position as a member of that committee in feeling essentially disrespected and bypassed and not consulted in the way that the procedures as they exist should have been used to allow me and my colleagues to investigate this case themselves, come what may. So I think that's very important. Now, this is theoretically a rally, not just a series of lectures, so I would love to invite someone up here to come and lead a chant, but it's not going to be me. So, who wants to come up here and just say what you want to say into the megaphone? I feel like I'm in a classroom here. I'm going to leave it right here.
Which pod will speak next?
Step right up. Constance? All you militant students? Oscar, as an alum? Come on. I mean, as a emeritite? No? Prima? Come on. Yes.
Very good.
I just realized I still have my backpack on, so I'll probably look a little wonky up here, so sorry. But one thing I'd really want to say, in light of, the focus right now, I feel like in everyone's mind is on Palestine, but I do want to remind people about the risk of the Kinsey Institute. We kind of had a little, we kind of skate by it, We still have it, but it's really, really thin out there. Like, and I think the thing, to me, not only just like with the lull that just happened here, is not only the fear of, speaking out, the cameras here, all the people, but just the fact that the president, when just kind of decided to do these things, or whatever other people in an office privately, and yeah, there was no real public explanation. We don't really have a reason or anything that we don't have anything to call on to genuinely understand, except kind of just discrimination in many ways. And what scares me overall is that this town has always been very open-minded, very blue, and there seems to just be a lot of pressure from the outside to make Bloomington and IU itself look like the way they want it to look like, not the way we want it to look like. There's just a lot of apathy right now, and the apathy comes from the fear of people like the president, banning people without too much of a reason. I think it's very worrying, and yeah, that's all I'll leave it at.
Let me quickly add to that. I mean, I do think you put your finger on something that I've really, really noticed the last few weeks amongst the faculty and amongst my colleagues. And that is really, to me, an unprecedented degree of anxiety and fear of saying or doing the wrong thing and then being punished for it by the administration. That is extremely unusual in my 30 years of experience on college campuses, right? But I've run into more than a few faculty and staff, particularly, of course, those without the protection of tenure, but not only those, who say, I'm with you, but I'm actually afraid to take action. I'm actually afraid to speak out. And I think the result has been that, a very chilly environment, which is unfortunate, but I think, as the last speaker suggested, is probably no accident. It also has meant that people like myself or Dr. Bukur or some of our other colleagues who have been stepping out front on these issues, we feel a certain degree of obligation to do so, because we do have, at least theoretically, until next week when this new bill passes, which no one's spoken about yet, we do have the protection of tenure, academic freedom, and free speech, or at least we imagine we do, and we probably do compared to the untenured on this campus, the non-tenured track students, and of course the staff of a place like the Eskenazi Museum, who are absolutely terrified about speaking out or explaining to the campus community what happened. So that specter of fear, which the green feather, of course, is supposed to represent, when that specter of fear over the issue of communism as opposed to being in favor of Palestinian liberation, is what drove many, many professors into silence in the 1950s. Now that specter of fear has taken on the issue of Israel-Palestine. Finally, I'll add this important point, which is that the blanket excuse for canceling, for instance, the art exhibit, is the question of the security and safety of the campus. Now, obviously, no one here wants to put our colleagues, our students, our staff, or anyone else on this campus in danger. But once you say, as this administration has said, that security and safety trump freedom of expression, you have thrown open the doors to suppressing anything you don't like. Let's take the Kinsey Institute. The Kinsey Institute has already, been threatened for decades by people who have even shown their willingness to use violence to suppress the Kinsey Institute. The 3%ers were here last year, 2 years ago. So, there's an issue that very quickly could turn to, I'm sorry, we can't keep the Kinsey on the campus anymore because it is a security risk, right? Or, I'm sure each of you can think of an issue, a speaker, an idea that you feel passionate about that other people might disagree with strongly. I was talking to a colleague last night about, wouldn't it be interesting to invite someone who was a critic of Modi and the BJP and Hindu nationalism and Hindu fascism to this campus? But I also know there are lots of students on this campus who might not like that, and who might protest, and who might even say, we're going to try and disinvite this person. That would be a security issue that the campus has to deal with. Would that mean that we could not invite Arundhati Roy, for example, or another Indian intellectual who's critical of Modi and the BJP? I hope not, but I no longer feel confident of that. Or another issue. The music school has been boasting about the opera they're putting on next year, Cavalier and Clay. For those of you who don't know, that opera is based on a novel by the Jewish author Michael Chabon. And Michael Chabon has been very, very outspoken about the problems created by Israel in Palestine. He visited the West Bank. He went on a tour of Hebron several years ago. He's a supporter of breaking the silence. He's a supporter of getting the settlers out of the West Bank. He's said so publicly. He's been denounced by rabbis and by the ADL. What if we wanted to invite Michael Chabon to campus next year to speak in conjunction with the opera? Will that be permitted? Yes or no? So as soon as you go down this road of saying certain people, certain ideas, certain artworks, certain Instagram tweets that you might or might not like create a security risk, it's all over. There's simply no way to have the campus as a space of freedom of speech, open inquiry, and guests that we like to invite. And as I said on Friday night, we the faculty can go see these people when we want, right? We can go to the Venice Biennale and see the artwork of Samia Halaby if we want, or maybe just to MSU, which seems to have the courage. It's the students who come here for 4 years and expect and deserve the university to be a space that brings people to them. That's what it means to be at a university. It's the students who are being cheated when security trumps your access to art, to speakers, to ideas, to faculty members, and to one another. Okay, who wants to come up here and say something?
Let's see if I can get this thing to work. So since I arrived here in 2021, at the exact same time President Whitten did, I have been told about the strength of the shared governance system here at IU. So I just want to run through some of the events and see, if you were consulted. So, were you consulted when President Whitten was hired illegally, like outside the normal faculty procedures?
No!
Were you consulted when the graduate student union, when the BFC passed a resolution in support of the graduate student union here at IU?
Yeah.
Yes.
What happened there? Is there a graduate student?
They didn't listen to us though.
So did it matter at all?
No.
What did the BFC passed an overwhelming support of the Graduate Student Union, and it was flat out ignored.
85% of the
85%, 1,400 signatures. Were you consulted about the cancellation of the Samia Halaby exhibit?
No! Done in secret.
Were you consulted about the suspension of Professor Sino?
No! It was bypassed.
Is there shared governance really here at IU?
No!
This is one of the things we have to keep fighting for, and especially as there's a sort of repressive regime in the Whitten administration, and we need to continue to fight against that regime. That's all I got. I ran out of stuff halfway through the speech. Free, free Palestine! 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 All right, who wants to do this now? This is great.
I just wanted to say on the point of shared governance that there's not only no shared governance here at IU, but anywhere in this country. This is not a democracy. None of us make these decisions. And we know that, right? Because we know that we are complicit in genocide, and that's not our choice. So I just wanted to say that real quick. And also that the Palestine Solidarity Committee every Monday is hosting a sit-in at the IMU Starbucks, and you're all welcome to come and protest, and we'll be out there every single Monday. So come see us.
All right, Maria Booker here again. I will say a few words about this SB 202 that there's a sign about down here. This is legislation that Republican statesman that also is on the board of directors of Indiana University East. In other words, a member of the community who purportedly has some knowledge about how IU functions, though I highly doubt it based on what this actual legislative thing says. And so it's a long and very confusing and contradicting bill, I'll just say that to begin with. But the bottom line is that it removes the ability of y'all students to elect a member of the Board of Trustees. Talk about lack of shared governance. The few elected people to the Board of Trustees at IU are the only remaining, basically, chance that we have against the complete politicization of this body, right? The majority of the members are already appointed by the governor. That means it swings with whatever super Republican majority we have now. And this law wants to remove the elected and to have the supermajority GOP legislation appoint the other two that were to be elected otherwise. So, all of you who could have voted before, too bad. Too bad. No more of that after this passes, if it passes. Who knows? The other things happening are rules for tenure to be approved by God knows who, but certainly not the faculty at Indiana University. And post-tenure review, fun times. This is something that our president is known to have been part of and engineered in the state of Georgia. And many of us have really thought, okay, well, who knows, maybe I was holding out against the fear that, she was appointed, as somebody mentioned before, thank you, Eli, about, coming in to do some dirty work against unionization, against tenure. We're seeing things now that might start to look like, oh boy, was I wrong to not be concerned about that at the beginning. So the post-tenure review is a big deal. Why? Well, academic freedom hinges on having that tenure and having that tenure respected, right? And the arguments that they're putting up are they want more intellectual diversity. Who here thinks that we're suffering from not having enough intellectual diversity on this campus, folks? One person, because you want more on one particular spectrum, I would imagine. But you know what? I feel like, to be perfectly honest, in the way I've experienced this university, as far as tenure is concerned, for sure, there's plenty of intellectual diversity. When I sit on, and I did for 4 years, on the tenure and promotion review committee at the campus level, I was sitting with optometrists, geophysicists, Kelly business persons. Believe me, the only thing we had in common was that we understood what good research is in a transdisciplinary sense. We didn't agree on much else. And somehow we functioned. Somehow the system functions. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, people. You know, just like that. So, if people want to go and testify, there is one last chance. Tuesday at midnight, you'll be competing with me and others. We're trying to push that button that allows you to have your name entered in and to go up to Indy on Wednesday to testify for 3 minutes. I think it's worth it. I think it's worth being on the record about what IU has been, what we've done, and to educate these folks who have no idea what's happening on this campus about what a research university is, how we do business, how we really open doors for students in many, many ways and enhance their ability to function in this world, and what it would mean to do away with all that. Thanks.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Olivia. I'm your friendly neighborhood barista and dog walker and graduate student. And I think it's a great testament to kind of the crisis going on campus, how many different but related events have brought us here today. Yep. And I appreciate everyone sharing and passing the mic because freedom of speech and, let's be honest, critical thinking is at crisis on campus in IU. All right? As grad students, we've been fighting to get stipends raised to a minimum living wage. We have been fighting for union recognition. Hasn't happened. All right? But now we come to class, we do our jobs, we grade your papers, and now freedom of speech doesn't even have a place on our campus. How many of you moved here for this? Yeah, professors too. How many of you moved here for this? All right, and now we see this at the state level and at the university level, and this is not what we're about. Yet, time and time again, we're told we're ungrateful. That, right? Who really knows the value of education?
Students.
Yeah, we're pretty tired. We're all pretty tired, I think. And yeah, I just wanted to say we didn't move here to be silenced. Thank you.
All right. I do want to return very briefly to SB 202, the bill that Dr. McClure, Maria, as I know her, was speaking about. We're all on a first-name basis here at Helm. So, what's amazing about this bill is the absolute cynicism and Orwellian nature of how it's being introduced. Because it's being introduced, as Maria suggested, in the name of quote-unquote, quote, diversity, intellectual diversity. What that means is that the Kelly School will now have to teach anti-capitalist thinkers alongside their business. No, that's not what it means. This is designed quite explicitly as a bill that is supposed to make conservative students, who I believe have a place here, but to make conservative students more comfortable. to introduce more conservative ideas into the classroom, to make sure that IU professors are not quote-unquote indoctrinating their students with our dangerous ideologies. I am quite confident that none of us do that in the classroom. But what's truly cynical about it is that it takes the language of diversity and equity and inclusion, language that is designed, of course, to diversify the university and intellectual life in other ways, to make the university a welcoming place for people of color, for sexual minorities, for Palestinians, for Muslims, for Jews for that matter, for everyone. That's the kind of diversity that this university used to stand up for. But now we simultaneously have an insistence on intellectual diversity and yet a willingness to shut down something like a set of abstract art just because it was produced by someone, an IU alum, an IU former professor, a world-famous artist who happens to have some ideas that she has expressed publicly but not in her art about Palestinian liberation and the behavior of Israel in the Gaza Strip. And that alone is what has made her a target for this university. That is not permitting intellectual diversity on this campus. Now, to give Pam Whitten credit where some credit is due, after a lot of pressure, she finally made a public statement. Usually the public statements are, oh, SB 202 is making the faculty nervous. Oh, the faculty don't like SB 202. That's putting it on us, and that, of course, is signaling, well, we don't really take them that seriously. They're just a bunch of whiny, spoiled liberal brats, so you can kind of ignore them. Well, finally, we heard the we. That is, we, as in the IU administration, recognize that SB 202 might be a threat to intellectual freedom.
Some of the provisions.
Right, some of the provisions. We'll see where that goes, but again, that's being said by an administration which has just demonstrated over the past month and a half that they do not value intellectual freedom or diversity. And so it's very, very hard to understand, or perhaps all too easy, what they're talking about. Next.
Talking about intellectual diversity and the call for a rallying cry and how difficult it is to call for a rallying cry because there are so many issues related, and someone who came up earlier talked about there being a lull between each one and how complicated that makes things. And that's exactly, and I was thinking about that in relation to something I was reading about this morning about Max Weber said that academics don't make good politicians because they are people who want to keep talking about ideas. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to keep talking about ideas. There are other spaces where that isn't, there's no space for that, there's no time for that, there are no amazing buildings, there's no incredible history of something like a land-grant university that has been produced in a place in the middle of this incredible space and making this history of things that would bring people, like the Kinsey Institute, bring people who were at the time of segregation, bringing black reformers to Indiana University, this long history of making the university and confirming that the university is a space for doing things that don't have places in other parts of our world. And that is fine. There are different places and different spaces for different things. But the university is a place for thinking and continuing to think about lots of different things and about the complicated ways that each of the different things that have brought us here today are and aren't related. So for example, with Professor Sino, I saw him as part of a teach-in a few months ago in the wake of October 7th, an incredible event here where so many different voices were heard. Hundreds of students came in and faculty members came in and out of the room. Many different kinds of perspectives were voiced. No conclusions were reached, because in fact that's what the teach-in made possible. I wasn't at the teach-in on Friday, but I heard about all the different ways that all the people who were there made it possible to think and talk about the complexity of all these different things that are happening. The graduate student strike, the suspension of Professor Sino, the threat to the Kinsey, the cancellation of the art exhibit, the bill that is being put forth to threaten what it is to have tenure. All those things each have their own specific sets of problems, and they are all related because as a whole they are a threat to the possibility of the university as a place where we can go around and spend time together in all kinds of spaces thinking about how these things are related. So when we try to understand what it will mean to kind of have all of that connection bring us to a place where we can do a political rallying cry, it makes sense that that doesn't happen easily and readily, because that is not, in fact, the thing that we are best at. But what we do have to do now, sadly, is spend some of our time together finding ways to kind of distill this into this sort of single kind of rallying cry, which I hope will emerge. If not today, it will emerge, because that, in fact, is what is being threatened. Is not the possibility of us all being together as a kind of political group, but us all being together in all of our different ways, in all of our different spaces here on this campus as thinkers.
So I'm going to also offer the opposite of a slogan in the spirit of critical thought, critical inquiry. I just want to point out many of you are wearing green feathers, and I so appreciate you all for that. I want to give a little context to that and to situate this moment sort of in relationship to the meaning of donning a green feather in this moment. So many of you already know this might not be news, which is wonderful. It should be known by everyone across IU and throughout Bloomington, that in 1953, Indiana state legislators attempted to ban the teaching of Robin Hood in public schools. A fairly innocuous text, and one that I grew up on and certainly enjoyed. As a form of protest against that, students here at IU, that same year, 1953, wore green feathers, drawing on the sort of iconography, the legacy of Robin Hood, to voice their dissent, to symbolize their fight against McCarthyism as it was growing and taking shape in the United States and locally in Indiana. So, as a gesture to call upon that history, to bring it forward in this present moment where we're seeing similar moves to push down academic freedom, freedom of inquiry, to produce terrifying and horrific censorship upon the sorts of work, conversation, expressions that we practice here at IU and throughout Bloomington. Students, faculty, staff members, community members are wearing green feathers to call upon that history, to bring it forward, to demonstrate visibly and readily their solidarity with one another to practice these freedoms that we find so dear and that we want to protect and continue to hold dear. That's something that I think motivates all of us and has brought us here together. So in the midst of these various frightening attacks on our community here at IU and here in Bloomington, we ask everybody to grab a green feather. Well, if you haven't gotten one, please, I've got them right here. Wear a green feather, take several, give them to your friends, your classmates, colleagues, students, TAs, teachers, neighbors, anybody who supports active solidarity and dissent against these forms of censorship, these forms of repression, and these forms of neo-McCarthyism that we're seeing emerge more and more today. So I'll be standing around, happy to pass out feathers and as well as flyers, going through the same sort of spiel that I just went through. But yeah, shout out to everybody donning the green feather and solidarity with you all.